Hello and welcome to the Sabrina River Folk Podcast with me, Nicola Haasz. Tonight's guest is Sarah Chave. Sarah was born on the Staffordshire-Shropshire border and grew up with a close connection to the River Severn. She's published a book, Hafren, The Wisdom of the River Severn, and joins me tonight to tell us all about it. So, welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Lovely to see you, Nikki.
So, if we could please, Sarah, if you could tell us a little bit about where you were born, where you grew up, and the history and background to your connection to the River Severn, please.
Well, I was born in a very small village on the Staffordshire-Shropshire border. It's a village called Bishop's Wood. And my mother was Welsh. She left the Welsh valleys in the 1930s when people had to leave the valleys because there wasn't work. And she came to live in Wolverhampton. And then she moved out of Wolverhampton and to this small village. And she brought us up on her own. So we had quite a Welsh upbringing. So the River Severn, which is what I write about in my book, was very much part of our lives because we lived very close to her. And so she was a very significant river for me throughout my life. And I was interested in looking at the wisdom of rivers. So it was natural for me to want to listen to the wisdom of the River Severn. So I really enjoyed that day that we had in Gloucestershire because, you know, the River Severn's always been very special to me. And it was wonderful to be surrounded by other people who obviously also felt that she was a very special river.
Where you grew up in your childhood, did you spend a lot of time walking by the river and sailing or fishing or any of those things on the river?
Well, we didn't live that close to the river. And also my mother didn't have a lot of free time to take us to the river, if you like. We always went to Ironbridge. That was the big place that you took visitors and relatives. And so it was always that special occasion that we went to the River Severn, or Hafren as she's called in Welsh. And so it was always associated with sort of like special, it was a special thing to do. But we used to spend time in a lot of the tributaries or streams that feed into rivers that then feed into Hafren. And Shropshire is a completely covered it's a big crisscross of tributaries that drain into Hafren. So we're very connected in that way to the life of Hafren.
You know, how did the actual writing of the book come about? When did you sort of decide that that was what you were going to do?
Well, I was a teacher in further education for a long time in Devon. I also lived in Yorkshire for a while. And my mother and my sister both moved back to Wales. So whenever we visited them, we used to cross over Hafren. And so it was always very significant that we travelled across her. And then during COVID, then we, about 10 years ago, we moved to Bath so that we live on this side of the English side, if you like. And my sister still lives on the Welsh side. And during COVID, we used to go when we were allowed to go for walks in the countryside and all of those things, and we were allowed to travel slightly. We used to spend a lot of time in South Gloucestershire looking over to the hills of Wales, and we did a lot of walks then around Hafren. And so that was very significant. And it seemed very strange to sit on one side and look across to Wales and know you couldn't go. It was like such a strange, significant feeling. And through my teaching and some academic research that I've done, I've been very interested in looking at other worldviews and how other worldviews can help us live in different ways in the world. So because we live in a time of very much of an ecological crisis, we really need to find different ways to live in the world. And they're not necessarily new ways. They're what Robert Macfarlane calls new old ways. That idea that they're often ideas that have been around and still are around in many traditional worldviews, and we can learn from those. And in the Celtic tradition, sources of water are sources of wisdom, and rivers are the way that wisdom is spread and communicated. So the sort of interest in the worldviews, the concern over the ecological crisis, and the time spent throughout my life, if you like, with Hafren kind of came together, and it seemed like a really good opportunity to write about those three different things through the lens, if you like, of spending time with the River Severn.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things and I thoroughly enjoyed your book, by the way. And I'm not the only one. Other people I've spoken to who bought one on the day have really enjoyed it as well. But there is obviously a strong environmental theme throughout the book. So you're obviously very motivated by that. I mean, was it quite a cathartic process to write the book to help to kind of organise your thoughts about how you felt?
I wouldn't say so much process as learn from. I felt that through doing, the walks and learning the myths and hearing the stories and the sort of research into some of the ideas, that I really felt I learned things that helped me to deal with it. So maybe it's because I've got a teaching background. I like learning things. Sort of learning is my bag, if you like. So, I thought that Rupert Reed's idea of Throughtopia was so important, and also Svetlana Boym's idea on different types of nostalgia as well. Some of these ideas that maybe we could talk a bit more about in this podcast. I think by learning those things, it helped me feel that we can't necessarily fix everything in the world, but we can do things in our daily lives that are going to make a difference. And also, I think that rivers teach us a lot about change, that change always has and always will happen. Hafren, 10,000 years ago, she used to run into the sea near Deeside, near Liverpool. And so, things have always changed. So it also puts our current situation into that, some people call it deep time context. So I think learning those things, learning from the river, helped me deal with, as you say, some of the anxiety one can feel about the environmental crisis that we face.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the Severn, Sabrina Hafren, she's often the first line of kind of pollution and being exploited, and being stripped of her resources because she is so big and has, much to offer in that respect on so many levels. But one of the things I did enjoy in your book was the meandering, the concept of meandering. And I thought, in my life, I need to meander more. If Sarah says we need to meander more, it's just like walking, and just rather than just going from A to B, taking a more sort of flowing routes, and I kind of really felt that, as I was reading that.
Yes, I think I must just have a very meandering mind, because everyone I've spoken to said, oh, I really like the way you meander. And I'm like, oh, really? I think I've just got a mind that meanders naturally. So there's a German saying, it's from Bismarck to pickled herrings, and I have got a brain that tends to do that, sort of just goes in lots of different directions. So and I think that rivers do meander in and also the research shows how important meandering is for creativity. So another thing that I'm very interested in is creativity in education, and I think that idea of being allowed to meander and allow our brains to float along, rather than always trying to solve things is really important.
Absolutely. And during the process of writing the book, did you sort of keep a journal as you were sort of visiting everything, or, you go into so much detail about, all the visits that you had along the Severn, or did you sort of write it up in the evening, or how did you sort of record your experiences to write them up later?
Well, I did have a notebook, and sometimes I'd write in it key things, or like if I saw a notice with something on, I would write it down, or if we stopped somewhere, I'd write a few things in it, and then I'd also write it up afterwards. But the other thing I found really useful was taking a lot of photos. So I take a lot of photos of things, and then I could look back at the photos and think, oh yes, that was interesting, or I remember that. And so I think that the idea of being able to look at photos, and I think through the photos you can re-experience, how it felt. And the other thing as well as facts and things, I did try to write down how I felt about things as I was going along, because I think sometimes we can remember facts, but you can't always remember feelings. So I think that was very important as well. And also, like we had like little walking guides and things like that, and maps, and quite often they'd get muddy, or they get very wet, so that also memorable, if you like, and quite a good writing prompt, if you like. You think, oh, these pages are so crinkled, and you could really feel how wet or muddy it was. So that was another thing as well, that multi-sensory type of experience.
Yeah, and you feel that in the book. You really go through a roller coaster of emotions. It's from capturing a moment of pure contentedness right through to feeling genuine anger and genuine frustration, which I think a lot of us do feel. And so you kind of, you really feel that roller coaster through the book. But yeah, I think, there's the river being so long, there is so much to look at, so much history, because there's a lot of socio and economic history that you write about in the book as well, which sounds like you really enjoyed investigating all that.
Yes, I think that, that again is the sort of teacher researcher in me, that, I do like finding things out. And I do find them, genuinely interesting. And I think I also find, people and places very fascinating. I'm not a person who's very often bored. I'm always interested in things. And I think that makes it, I'm not saying that to boast about myself, but I think that makes it, if people know you're interested in them, then they do tell you all kinds of interesting things. And I think that was helpful. And also, because I worked in further education, I'm used to dealing with people from all different backgrounds and all different ages, and being interested in what they're saying. And I think that encourages people to tell you their story, if you like.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, it's probably an impossible question to ask, or to answer even, is where was your favourite place?
Yes, that is an impossible question. I think they were all special in different ways. And what I found interesting doing going around with these talks, is that people have all picked out different things. Other people have picked out different things as their favourite things. So one person really appreciated the story of the swan, and got me to read that out at a bookshop event about the swan in the bird hide. And I think that was special. I think going to the source obviously was very special, but it was also a little bit sad because my husband wasn't well at the time, and so we were missing him. So that's sort of still, sort of that sort of thing where you could feel all those emotions at the same time. And obviously Iron Bridge is special because it was so much part of my childhood, and that's got strong memories of my mother. And I think those were special places. I think the Fish Pass was quite an amazing place, like to see under the water, and I'd say to anybody, go and see it. You do need to check. Some people from Worcester said people do need to check whether it's open or not, because it's not open. It's run by volunteers, and it's only open at certain times of year, and then there's flooding in Worcester. So I think that was very amazing to see under the water. I think one of the really special events, if you like, for us with my husband was when we got caught when we got entangled in the hawthorn. And it was just so funny, because even though it hurt, it was still funny, and it made us think so much of the Mary Webb poem about the hawthorns and the green rain. I think that was a really special moment as well. And that was in Shropshire, which again was very important to me. And I did notice that there were 3 chapters set in Shropshire out of 10 or something. So that does a bit Shropshire heavy, this book. So, maybe that's, like another thing that's very telling, that Shropshire was so important to me.
I mean, was there anything that took you by surprise? I mean, you've mentioned the fish pass at Diglis, but obviously when we go out exploring the Severn, and we travel up and down her banks, and we absorb the energy and the history and all of those things as storytellers or as researchers, was there anything new and unexpected, that you discovered that you were really excited about?
I think walking up to the source and seeing how literally they come from the Severn, the Wye, and the Istwyth, and the Rheardol as well. They all come from a peat bog, and they don't come from a spring. They come from rainwater. And to walk up there and see the river becoming smaller and smaller, and then just a trickle, and then just a pool of water, and then beyond that, no water. It's really very striking that, in the morning you can drive across the Severn Bridge, and then, sort of a few hours driving and then a few hours walking, then you can be literally at the source and see her appear like that, from not from a spring, but, just from a pool of water. I think that really is very surprising. It's sort of hard to really conceive of that. And also the fact that those rivers come from rain rather than from springs. And I did have a bit of a scary moment where it was like, in the Celtic tradition, sources of water, because often people say springs, and springs, in different, do have a kind of sacred aspect to them. And so then I was thinking, what if it's a spring? But then I went back to the source material I was using, and it said, no, it says sources of water. So I think that is absolutely fascinating, that all of that comes from rain, and that is that long water cycle. And, in that ancient myth, they understood the long water cycle, even though they wouldn't have called it that. And, the idea of the rain coming back to the peat bog, and then the cycle starting again. And, that goes to the heart of kind of what we're doing to rivers, if you like, and the whole water cycle and the whole environment. We're not caring for water, because, without the long water cycle, we'd be lost, wouldn't we? Because it's the long water cycle that turns salt water into fresh water, and, we are interfering with it. So I think that it's, just so fundamental that these rivers can come from rainwater.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with you. There is a sort of otherworldliness at the source, isn't there? It's an astonishing place that you never forget visiting. And because I live at the very end of the Severn, the difference between the source and then the kind of a lot of people see the Severn estuary as as a very industrial place, but actually we've tried to show in previous episodes that it's actually really full of life, and really alive, and wants to flow, and and all of those things. But yeah, the source is a wonderful place to be, and to witness that, purity, in that respect. Absolutely. And I totally, I really felt your love at every stage, through the journey, and really enjoyed it. So obviously the book came out, and you've been on a kind of a public, tour and book signing and all of that sort of thing. Has that been sort of, was that as you expected? Have you enjoyed that process, that part of it, and connecting with, members of the public and things?
I think it's sort of enjoyable, scary, in all of those things at the same time. I think it is very strange when you have lots of thoughts inside your head, and then you're working really hard and the editing process, and then it's out there in the world, and you're not exactly sure, where your book travels. And that is fascinating to think that, it's sort of a bit like the river meanders. Your ideas are out there meandering around in the world. And with something academic that I wrote to do with teacher education, somebody did contact me and they asked me some questions on social media. And I said, "Oh, where were you contacting me from?" And they said, "New Zealand." And I was like, "Wow, New Zealand." This was a book about teacher education. So you never quite know where things are going. And I think that's, really fascinating. And to meet other people who are also passionate about rivers, has been amazing. And people pick up on such different things from the book. One place I went to, the speaker asked me about pine martens, and I was like, "Pine martens?" And he obviously was, because I think it was near the Forest of Dean, and I think pine martens is connected with the Forest of Dean. And obviously that meant such a lot to him about the pine marten. So I learned from that, people pick such different things out, that that it was obviously a really important thing for him. So people all pick different things out. So it is lovely to meet lots of different people and hear what what's particularly struck home for them. And it does feel like a privilege to be able to speak to people who are interested in what you've written, So it has been lovely.
Yeah, and absolutely. This is very much about what the podcast is about, is capturing all of that, and having a lasting memory of it. Because like you say, the river is so long and it affects so many people in so many different ways. It's beautiful to be able to record people's experiences with the Severn. And in all your work that you've done around Sabrina Hafren, is there a spiritual connection for you? Do you think that the river has a goddess, or how do you feel that way towards Hafren?
In academia, they sometimes call it the other than human world or the more than human world, and I do think that we're much more connected to this things beyond the human than perhaps we've allowed ourselves to be in the Western world, and that there's a lot beyond that sense of reason, like the Enlightenment and reason and all of the things which sort of dominate Western society. So I wouldn't sort of put it sort of like coalesce it into a goddess necessarily, but that idea of where that we're all interconnected, and in some indigenous ways of understanding the world, everything's energy waves, which is kind of what quantum physics is, although I've never managed to completely grasp what quantum physics is. But it's this idea of energy waves, and energy waves coalesce into different things. So stones, people, and rivers were sort of coalesces of energy waves. So I think that idea of how the boundary between ourselves and others is much less rigid than we, like in Western societies, perhaps understand. And so we've kind of got like an interconnection with a river. So to me, it doesn't seem problematic at all to listen to the wisdom of a river, just as I might listen to your wisdom or my mother's wisdom or, my grandfather's wisdom, or, why wouldn't we be able to listen to the wisdom of a river? It just seems, like quite a natural thing to me. And you could call that a spiritual thing, but I wouldn't want to sort of coalesce it into, say, like a goddess. We have these naming stories, and so they have coalesced into, like, Sabrina, she turned into a river nymph, and the giant story, in the Welsh story of Hafren, there were the three pools there, the giant's daughters. So we tell stories where we have to use words, because words is all we've got, but you can also feel these things, can't you? And then that goes beyond. The word goddess is perhaps not really a big enough word to capture what it is that we're experiencing, but we can perhaps sense it. And I think it's very strange that the Oasis singer, the one, Noel Gallagher, he was actually underneath the river when he wrote the words for this song, Acquiesce, which originally appeared as a B-side, but was recently re-released as an A-side. It was in the charts quite recently because of the Oasis tour. And he was actually underneath Hafren when he wrote that song, because he was trapped there for 4 hours, which personally, I don't think I'd like to be trapped in that tunnel for 4 hours. And he sort of was saying that, we need each other, and we can believe in each other, and that we can believe that we can uncover what's sleeping in our souls, that we do really know we're interconnected in this way, but we've kind of like blocked it out in a sort of fast moving, autonomous, do your own thing kind of world. And so, when those are the words that came to him when he was, literally underneath Hafren like that. So I think that, it is sleeping in our souls. It is there, and we can believe in it, but we've just allowed it to sort of go to sleep, if you like. We just need to awaken it a little bit. Does that answer your question about spirituality? That's quite a hard subject, isn't it?
You're saying that we are living in a kinship with the natural world.
Yes.
Is a spiritual thing in itself.
Yes.
Deeply within us, but also forgotten, and waiting to be, reopened in this kinship with our water friends and our plant friends and our animal friends. And, that's, absolutely. I think, lots of people believe that, definitely. And if we all believe that, then we would have a greater care for the natural world. And I love all the animals that are part of the river's ecosystem. And obviously you really enjoyed investigating some of that aspects of it as well.
Yes. So I think that was, that, and I suppose that's when you're walking or meandering or visiting or having a picnic or whatever, you do start to pay attention. So I think that that's important as well, that you start noticing things, like the different sorts of butterflies, or the different animals that you might see, or the rocks, or the sunsets, the clouds, all of those things that perhaps we just need to take the time, if you like. The poet Mary Oliver, who writes very beautifully about the natural world, and she said, we can't listen to the wisdom of a river in a mere hour or a day. It takes time, and I think maybe that is a connection with COVID, if you like, that during COVID, we that's what we did with our time, because that's what we could do. So, I think that was, something that was important, if you like, that people did spend time. It's funny, like I've got just, what do they call them? Like things like your phone. They can make little films out of your photos, and it says the Great Outdoors 2020, the Great Outdoors 2021, and the Great Outdoors 2022. And we did spend a lot of time in the Great Outdoors. So I think that sort of being able to spend time and pay attention helps you to really understand more and appreciate and see more, if you like.
Yeah, and didn't we need it? Goodness me. We all needed that
Yes.
natural healing during that very difficult period, and I think many books were written during that period. But also through the book, you have these lovely connections with people, and also the food is a bit of a running theme through it as well, Sarah.
Oh, really? I hadn't noticed that.
With the cakes and things like that. So that was a part of the enjoyment.
Well, my husband very much likes cakes, and I can't, because of my eyesight and my health, I can't really do a lot of these things on my own. So, he's always been a very willing companion. So I'm going to blame him for the cakes. The thing about the bird song as well is I really enjoyed the, like the different bird song, and the bird song apps that you can get really help you. I help you. We shouldn't necessarily label things and only enjoy them because we label them, but it helps you appreciate how many different birds we're hearing. And you mentioned about, who people you've met, and there was quite a young person at one of my talks, and he said how much he liked me, the way I'd mentioned the bird apps, because he really liked them as well. So I thought that's something in there for everybody. But that time when we heard the linnets, and I was just so excited to hear the linnets. And now if ever I hear linnets anywhere, I'm like so excited. So the Welsh poet called them fellow poets. They do have a beautiful song, linnets.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are so many treasures, aren't there, as you highlight in the book, in treasures in the natural world, to really be, inspired by. And obviously our Severn delivers many of those things, which is really wonderful. I mean, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the book. I like the slowness of the pace as well. It wasn't a book that you just read through really quickly. I just really felt it's the meandering thing coming back again, Sarah. It's a book you can meander through. It's good to be reminded to slow down, as well, and to take a sort of a slower route on things, because we all get so busy in our modern lives, getting from here, there, and everywhere, and appointments, and got to be here, got to be there, and it's just really nice to slow down. But I think it's a real treasure. So, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and sharing some of your background on writing the book. You must be so pleased, though, with it.
Well, yes, it's sort of quite difficult to imagine that other people like what you've written, because you're never really very happy with your own ideas. I think that Rupert Reed's idea of Throughtopia is, when it's not like being optimistic or pessimistic, but how we get through things together. And I think that I feel like with this book, I've been able to express that. We don't need to be utopian or dystopian, that there is a value and there is a way of meandering, if you like. And it's how we treat each other and how we treat our kin in the wider natural world, and how we're going to get through these difficult times together. And we can think about the sorts of worlds we want to create and try to create them, and I think that's to sort of be able to share that with other people and get that point across is, like, we don't need to be full of optimism or despair. There is, because the environmental issues are very distressing for people, and young people suffering a lot from their concern. And so I think we don't need to be utopian, but it's how we treat each other and get through things together, which I think is really the most important thing that perhaps I learned. And to be able to share that with other people and for them to sort of get it does mean a lot to me.
Many thanks to Sarah for coming on the podcast. You can find her book online and in bookstores.